The hum of the server racks was my constant companion, a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the floorboards of my sanctuary. It was a familiar lullaby, far more comforting than any human voice. My apartment, a fortress of reinforced steel and Faraday cages, was a testament to my chosen isolation. Outside, the city pulsed with a life I'd long since opted out of. Here, within these walls, the only currency that mattered was data, and my expertise was its undisputed king. I traced a finger over the cool, smooth surface of my primary console, the faint glow of 1,000 blinking LEDs reflecting in my eyes. Each light represented a connection, a stream of information I could access, manipulate, or, if necessary, obliterate. For years, this digital world had been my sole domain. The real world, with its unpredictable variables and messy emotions, held no appeal. My skills were my shield, my intellect my weapon. A soft chime, barely audible above the server's drone, broke my concentration. It wasn't a system alert, those were far more aggressive. This was an incoming message, a rarity. My security protocols were legendary, designed to repel any unauthorized intrusion. Yet here it was, a single, persistent ping. Curiosity, a dangerous beast I usually kept leashed, stirred within me. I initiated a multi-layered trace, my fingers dancing across the holographic keyboard. The message originated from a series of anonymized nodes bouncing across continents with practiced ease. Whoever this was, they weren't amateur. But they were also, I suspected, overconfident. They'd managed to bypass my outer defenses, a feat few had ever accomplished, but they hadn't breached the core. Not yet. The message itself was brief, a single line of text that sent a jolt of something akin to dread through me. My past is no longer my own, user IP. Below it, a string of code, not random characters, but a key. A key to a vault I thought was long buried. My breath hitched. I recognized the encryption. It was an old one I'd developed myself, a private labyrinth designed to safeguard certain memories. Memories I had meticulously scrubbed from every public and private record, memories I had convinced myself were dead and buried. My fingers flew, inputting the key into a secure sandbox environment. The code unraveled, not into a threat but into a series of encrypted files. And then the payload. Not a virus designed to cripple my systems, but something far more insidious. A ransomware program, but not one designed to extort money. This was designed to extort secrets. My secrets. The initial breach wasn't just a probe, it was a declaration of war. The ransomware began its insidious work, not on my current systems, but on a series of dormant servers I maintained, servers that held the digital detritus of my former life. Old projects, fragmented communications, personal logs, all the pieces I'd carefully compartmentalized and hidden away. A cold, metallic taste filled my mouth. This wasn't just about me anymore. The ransomware was spreading, branching out, targeting not just my personal archives, but also with terrifying precision, the network infrastructure of the city's primary power grid. A sophisticated attack, designed to cripple critical systems if my demands weren't met. I watched, my gaze fixed on the cascading lines of code as the ransomware began its encryption process. The progress bar, a sickeningly cheerful green, crept forward with agonizing slowness. Each percentage point represented a piece of my life being locked away, a secret about to be leveraged. But it wasn't just my secrets. This was no random act of digital vandalism. This was personal, and it was global. The carefully constructed walls of my isolation began to crumble. I was no longer just user IP, the reclusive digital phantom. I was the target, and the world, it seemed, was about to pay the price for my past. My hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as I initiated a counter-protocol, a ghost in the machine I hadn't used in years. The game had changed, and I was no longer playing on my own terms. I needed to move. I needed to understand who was behind this and why now. The digital breadcrumbs were already being laid, and I had a terrible feeling they would lead me back to places I never wanted to revisit. The sterile scent of ozone and something faintly metallic pricked my nostrils the moment the automated doors hissed open. This place, the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, was less a workspace and more a mausoleum for digital ghosts. Gleaming white surfaces stretched in every direction, reflecting the harsh, unflinching light from the ceiling panels. Not a speck of dust dared to settle here, and frankly, neither did I. But the code had dragged me out of my quiet existence, yanking me back into a world I'd worked so hard to forget. A colleague, their face a mask of professional detachment, gestured me towards a bay. User IP, they've prepped a workstation for you. Their voice was a low monotone, as if even speaking in this environment required careful calibration. I nodded, my gaze already fixed on the array of monitors. They hummed with a low, constant energy, screens displaying intricate patterns of light and data. This was it. The digital battlefield where my past and future were about to collide. The ransomware wasn't just a system locked down. It was a targeted strike, a meticulously crafted weapon aimed directly at me. The encryption key I'd found was a taunt, a clear sign that the attacker knew me, knew my secrets. I sat down, the cool, smooth surface of the desk seeping through my thin shirt. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a familiar dance about to begin. The colleague had loaded the initial data packet, the logs from the affected systems, the fragmented remnants of the malware. My task: dissect it, understand its anatomy, and find the attacker's fingerprints. The first pass was always the hardest, like sifting through a collapsed building for a single, vital piece of evidence. I initiated a deep scan, letting the algorithms I'd built, the ones I'd trusted to keep me safe, do their work. The screens flickered, lines of code scrolling at an impossible speed, highlighting anomalies, deviations, the subtle whispers of intrusion. Anything? The colleague asked, their voice barely disturbing the hushed atmosphere. Too early to say, I replied, my eyes glued to a particularly complex subroutine. The ransomware was elegant, not just brute force but sophisticated. It moved like water, finding the path of least resistance, exploiting vulnerabilities I hadn't even known existed in the target infrastructure. My internal monologue was a frantic hum. Who could do this? Who would have the skills, the access, the motivation? The encryption key. It's personal. They're not just after money or chaos, they're after me. They want me to see this, to know they are here. The ransomware itself was a marvel of malicious engineering. It wasn't just encrypting files, it was exfiltrating data simultaneously, a silent, invisible siphon. And the method of deployment. It was a zero-day exploit, something that hadn't been publicly disclosed. That meant the attacker had either found it themselves, or they had an inside source. It's masked through a series of anonymized proxy servers bouncing around the globe. But the timing, it's too precise. They weren't just randomly hitting targets. There's a pattern, a rhythm to their movements. The colleague leaned closer, their brow furrowed. What kind of pattern? It correlates with the public announcements of the critical infrastructure upgrades. I explained, my fingers flying across the keyboard, pulling up comparative data streams. The new data centers, the network backbone enhancements. They're hitting us after the upgrades when the systems are most vulnerable, most complex. This was the wait that doesn't add up moment. Why attack after the upgrades? If the goal was disruption, wouldn't they hit before the improvements were in place? Unless the upgrades themselves were the bait or the key to something else. It's like they're not just trying to break in, I mused, the words tumbling out before I could fully process them. They're trying to see what's inside, the data exfiltration. It's not random, it's targeted. They're looking for something specific. The tension in the room ratcheted up, a silent, palpable force. Every flicker of the screens, every whir of the cooling fans seemed to amplify the urgency. I felt a prickle of doubt. Was I seeing this clearly, or was my own history clouding my judgment? The encryption key, my personal code, was a direct link to my past. Was this attacker using that knowledge to manipulate me, to lead me down a rabbit hole of my own making? The malware's payload, I continued, ignoring the creeping self-doubt. It's designed to be stealthy. It's injecting itself into the system's core processes, piggybacking on legitimate functions. Whoever wrote this understands operating systems at a fundamental level. They're not just a hacker, they're an architect of digital destruction. I zoomed in on a specific string of code. It was a small, seemingly insignificant piece, but it was out of place. A tiny anomaly in the otherwise perfect execution of the malware. It was like finding a single, misplaced brick in an otherwise flawless wall. "This," I said, my voice tight with a sudden realization, "this is their signature. It's a subtle deviation from standard coding practices, a stylistic choice. Almost arrogant." The colleague stared at the screen, their professional facade cracking just enough to reveal a flicker of concern. "Can I trace it?" I shook my head, a grim certainty settling in. "Not directly. It's too well disguised, but it tells me something. It tells me they're not afraid. They want to be found in a way. This wasn't just an attack, it was a message. And the language of that message was deeply, terrifyingly personal. The vault I thought was long buried was being pried open, and I had a sickening feeling I knew who held the crowbar. The hum of the servers in the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, was usually a comforting lullaby. Tonight, it felt like a death rattle. I'd been tracing the digital tendrils of this ransomware, a phantom limb of my past reaching out to cripple the present. The initial breach, the one that had woken me from my self-imposed exile, was elegant, almost beautiful in its brutality. But this was different. This was a declaration of war. My colleague, the one with the perpetually furrowed brow, pointed at the monitor. "User IP, look at this anomaly." I leaned closer, my eyes scanning the cascading lines of code. It wasn't part of the original ransomware signature. This was an overlay, a surgical addition. "What is it?" "It's a control signal, not for data encryption, not for network disruption. It's linked to an external system, something physical." He tapped a few keys, bringing up schematics. My stomach tightened. The schematics showed a series of automated gates, a complex network of them controlling the flow of goods at a major shipping port. "The port," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. This wasn't about my secrets anymore. This was about something bigger, critical infrastructure, the kind of thing that could cripple a city, a nation. "It's live," my colleague stated, his voice tight. "And they are manipulating it. Not a full shutdown, not yet, just rerouting. A single container flagged for special handling is being diverted to a restricted zone, a zone not on any public manifest." My fingers flew across my keyboard, pulling up satellite imagery, traffic feeds, anything that could give me eyes on the ground. The port was a sprawling, industrial beast, a concrete and steel leviathan breathing in the salty air. The container in question was unremarkable, a standard 20-foot box, its markings obscured by the distance and the glare of the dock lights. But its path was anything but standard. It was snaking through a labyrinth of service roads, away from the main cargo areas towards a heavily fortified warehouse complex. "Why a container?" I muttered, frustration a hot, bitter tide rising in my throat. "Why not just shut down the whole damn port? Maybe they don't want a full shutdown." The colleague offered, his gaze fixed on the real-time data. "Maybe they want to send a specific message." This was escalation. They had demonstrated their ability to cause tangible physical disruption, and they had done it without leaving a trace, without tripping any alarms until this subtle, insidious rerouting began. I scrubbed my hand over my face. This was no longer a game of digital chess. This was a physical threat. The idea was unsettling. My sanctuary had always been behind screens in the clean, logical world of code. The real world was messy, unpredictable, and full of things I'd spent years trying to escape. "I need to go there," I said, the words surprisingly firm. My colleague looked up, surprise flashing in his eyes. "User IP, It's the only way," I interrupted. "They've shown their hand, they can reach out. I need to see what they're reaching for." I looked at the monitor, at the tiny, pixelated image of the container moving inexorably towards its unknown destination. It was a physical manifestation of the threat that had been lurking in my digital life, a tangible anchor for the abstract fear I'd been living with. I stood, a sense of grim resolve settling over me. The sterile, cold air of the forensic center suddenly felt suffocating. The hum of the servers, once a comfort, now sounded like a warning. The attacker wasn't just trying to expose my past. They were actively shaping the present, using real-world leverage to amplify their digital assault. And I had a sinking feeling that this container, whatever it held, was just the first act in a much larger, far more dangerous play. I had to get to that port. I had to see what was inside that container before it was too late. The air in the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, always felt thin, like breathing through a sieve. It was a place built for clarity, for dissecting the digital detritus of our modern world, but right now it felt like a tomb. The hum of the servers was a low, constant thrum against my skull, a counterpoint to the frantic beat of my own pulse. "Are you sure about this, user IP?" The colleague, their voice a low murmur, stood beside me, a shadow in the stark white light. They gestured towards the screen displaying the live GPS coordinates of the container. It was a tiny, blinking red dot, a digital harbinger of doom inching across a map of shipping lanes. "It's the only way," I interrupted. "They've shown their hand. They can reach out. I need to see what they're reaching for." I looked at the monitor, at the tiny, pixelated image of the container moving inexorably towards its unknown destination. It was a physical manifestation of the threat that had. The ransomware attack wasn't just about money or even crippling infrastructure. Though it was doing plenty of that, it was personal. Every line of code, every encrypted file they'd exhumed pointed back to me, to a time I'd spent years trying to bury. But a physical asset. "Exactly," I said, my voice tighter than I intended. "And that's what they want me to figure out. They want me to chase this ghost, to pull me further out of my hole. And I will." I turned away from the screen, my gaze sweeping over the banks of monitors displaying cascading lines of code, the silent witnesses to my digital life. Each one felt like an accusation. My fingers flew across a keyboard, a familiar dance, but my mind was 1,000 miles away, sifting through the wreckage of my past. The attacker was clever, incredibly so. They hadn't just found my old vulnerabilities, they'd weaponized them. And the key, the linchpin, was something that had happened in a dusty, forgotten warehouse on the outskirts of the city years ago. I pulled up a secure terminal, the interface stark and functional. My own personal archive, a fortress I'd built brick by digital brick, was the next target, not to defend it but to delve into it, to unearth what I'd so desperately tried to keep buried. The colleague watched, their expression a mixture of apprehension and professional curiosity. They knew I was reclusive, brilliant, and notoriously difficult. They didn't know why, not really. They saw the aftermath, the carefully constructed walls. They didn't see the fire that had burned it all down. "You're going back in, aren't you?" The colleague stated, not a question. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the login prompt. "I have to. They're using it against me. The only way to stop them is to understand what it is." The password entry felt like turning a key in a vault I'd sealed with my own blood. Each character was a memory, a sting. The system responded with a soft chime granting access. The screen filled with a directory structure, a map of my buried life. Files, meticulously organized, some encrypted with algorithms so old they were practically archaic, others with layers of obfuscation I'd designed to be impenetrable. Or so I'd thought. The attacker had bypassed my outer defenses with unnerving ease. They hadn't brute forced their way in. They'd found a backdoor, a forgotten access point I'd left open for myself, a lifeline I'd never expected to need again. And through that backdoor, they'd accessed a specific folder, one labeled with a cryptic alphanumeric string. A string that sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins, that folder. I'd created it after the incident. It contained raw data, unedited logs, fragmented video feeds, the digital remnants of that fateful night. I'd sworn I'd wiped it, that I'd purged every byte, but here it was, intact, and the attacker had been inside. My hands trembled as I navigated to the folder. The files within were a digital Pandora's box. I clicked on one, a log file titled Event Alpha Log 20,420,815, TXT. The text scrolled, a dry, clinical account of system failures, network intrusions, and a cascade of security breaches. But buried within the technical jargon were names I hadn't thought of in years. Names of people who were no longer here. A particular timestamp caught my eye, 02:17 a.m., the same timestamp that appeared in the ransomware's ransom note, highlighted like a scar. It was the moment the system had truly collapsed, the moment everything went wrong. I scrolled down, my breath catching in my throat. There was a reference to a data transfer, an unauthorized exfiltration. The data itself was classified as extremely sensitive, and the recipient. The logs were corrupted at that point, the destination IP address a jumble of meaningless characters, but the attacker had clearly managed to piece it together. The colleague shifted beside me. User IP, what is it? I didn't answer, my focus entirely on the screen. The sterile environment of the forensic center faded away, replaced by the phantom stench of ozone and burnt plastic, the echo of panicked shouts, the warehouse, the flickering emergency lights. This wasn't just about my past, it was about a specific event, a catastrophic failure that had cost lives. And someone, whoever was behind this ransomware, knew exactly which part of my history they were excavating. They weren't just threatening to expose secrets. They were threatening to drag me back into the wreckage, to force me to confront the choices I'd made, the people I'd failed. The container on the screen, moving towards its unknown destination, suddenly felt less like a threat and more like a key. A key to unlocking the truth and the nightmare I tried so hard to forget. The silence in the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, pressed in on me. It was a stark contrast to the phantom cacophony still ringing in my ears, the clang of metal, the hiss of escaping air, the frantic, disembodied voices. I gripped the edge of my workstation, my grip tight. The warehouse. It had been a trap, not just a digital one but a physical one too. The attacker knew I'd be here in this sterile, controlled environment poring over code, and they wanted me to remember. My gaze drifted back to the screen, to the cascading lines of hexadecimal code that had been the immediate aftermath of the ransomware attack. It was elegant, terrifyingly so. The encryption was unlike anything I'd encountered in years. It was a ghost from my own past, a technique I'd developed, refined, and then buried deep under layers of regret and a desperate desire for anonymity. A colleague entered my workspace, their footsteps unnervingly loud on the polished linoleum. User IP, I've been staring at that screen for, well, a while, anything. I shook my head, not taking my eyes off the data. It's familiar, too familiar. The memory of that night, the night of the warehouse, was a jagged shard in my mind. I'd been young, arrogant, and ruthless. I'd leveraged a vulnerability, a backdoor I'd discovered in a competitor's network to cripple their operations. It had been a spectacular success, a testament to my burgeoning skills, but the collateral damage, that was the part I tried to forget. Familiar how? The colleague pressed, leaning closer. The encryption signature, I finally said, my voice low. It's mine, or rather it was mine, a variant I used years ago before I went dark. The colleague blinked. But why would someone use your old code and so effectively? That was the million-dollar question. The code was sophisticated, but it also had quirks, personal touches, little digital fingerprints that only I would recognize. And whoever had resurrected it had not only understood it, but had improved upon it, weaponized it. I started pulling up old, archived project files, encrypted even from myself, requiring a forgotten passphrase that took me a solid hour of furious typing and mental backtracking to recall. The digital dust I disturbed was thick. There were names, project codenames, dates, and then I saw it, a project codenamed Chimera. It was the very system that had been compromised in the warehouse incident, the system I'd used my skills to dismantle. My breath hitched. Chimera. It had been a revolutionary piece of software designed for things I didn't like to think about anymore. And the person who had been leading its development, the one who had invested everything into it, had been utterly ruined by my actions. Their reputation, their career, their life all shattered. I pulled up the digital footprint of the attack, cross-referencing it with the Chimera project's personnel records. The ransomware was a twisted echo of my past, and the targets the compromised infrastructure. The leaked data, they weren't random. They were specifically chosen. They were companies and organizations that had either benefited from Chimera's downfall or had been directly involved in its acquisition and subsequent suppression. The pieces began to click into place with a sickening certainty. The attacker wasn't just some random hacker. They were someone who knew my history, my methods, and my regrets. They were someone who had been on the other side of the warehouse incident. I scrolled through the list of key personnel associated with Chimera. There were dozens, but one name stood out, a name I hadn't thought of in years, a name I deliberately tried to erase from my memory. The lead architect of Chimera. They had disappeared after the incident, their public life dissolving like smoke. I typed their name into a secure search engine, my fingers trembling slightly. The results were sparse, almost deliberately so. A few old forum posts, a brief mention in a defunct tech journal, and then nothing. It was as if they had willingly scrubbed themselves from the digital world, but I knew that kind of erasure. It took immense skill and often a powerful motive. The motive was clear now, revenge, and the skills, they were undeniable. The sophistication of the ransomware, the ability to bypass advanced security protocols, the intimate knowledge of my own past code, it all pointed to someone who had been intimately involved with Chimera, someone who had the technical prowess and the burning desire to make me pay. I looked at the profile picture on an old, archived social media page, a younger face, bright-eyed and full of ambition, a face I recognized from hushed, anxious meetings in the days leading up to the warehouse incident. The eyes in the picture seemed to stare right through me, filled with a pain I had inflicted. "I know who it is," I murmured, the words barely a whisper in the sterile quiet. This wasn't just a hunt anymore. This was a reckoning. The hum of the servers in the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, was a familiar lullaby, but tonight it felt like a ticking clock. Each whir, each blink of a status light seemed to mock my efforts. I was deep in the guts of the network, tracing the tendrils of the ransomware. It wasn't just a brute force attack. It was surgical, precise, and the signature. Oh, the signature was the problem. It was mine, or rather, a twisted, corrupted echo of mine. I'd spent the last 12 hours in this place, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the gnawing dread that this was more than just a random act of digital vandalism. The ransomware, codenamed Chronolock by the analysts I'd grudgingly allowed access to my workstation, was designed to do more than encrypt. It was designed to reveal. And the targets, they weren't random either. They were tied to my past, to the projects I thought I'd buried so deep no one would ever find them. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a blur of practiced motion. I was trying to isolate the core encryption module, to sever its connection to the command and control server before it could unleash its final payload. The screen was a chaotic canvas of code, logs, and network traffic, a digital battlefield where every keystroke was a tactical maneuver. Anything, user IP. The voice of the lead analyst, a sharp woman with eyes that missed nothing, cut through the quiet. She stood just behind my shoulder, a silent sentinel. I grunted, not taking my eyes off the cascading lines of hexadecimal. It's fighting back, not just passively, it's actively adapting. The code I'd written years ago, a prototype for data security, had been perverted. It was designed to be self-aware, to evolve its defenses. I'd built it as a theoretical exercise, a proof of concept that had scared even me. And now someone had resurrected it, twisted it into a weapon. Whose signature are we looking at? The analyst pressed, her tone even. I hesitated. Admitting it felt like admitting a part of myself had been weaponized. Mine, or a very close approximation. I spun around in my chair, meeting her gaze. This isn't just a ransomware attack, it's personal. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly masked. Elaborate. The malware, it's built on some of my old code. Code I thought was wiped, code with unique identifiers. Little quirks that only I would put in. And whoever is using it, they've not only accessed it, they've understood it, and they've weaponized it. I turned back to the screen, my voice tight. They're using my own creations against me. The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch. The steady hum of the forensic center seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I could feel the weight of the compromised systems pressing down, the potential for global disruption a heavy cloak. Suddenly, a new window popped up on my primary monitor, unbidden. It was a simple text interface, stark white on black, and a single line of text blinked at me. I can't hide forever, user IP. My breath hitched. This was no longer just about the ransomware. This was a direct communication, the attacker. What is that? The analyst asked, her voice sharp. It's them, I replied, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. They're talking to me. I thought I could disappear, erase my past, foolish. My jaw tightened. They knew. They knew about my reclusive life, my deliberate erasure from the digital world. This was Echo, I was sure of it. The way they played with words, the subtle taunts. Echo, the ghost from my past, the one I'd tried so hard to outrun. What do they want? The analyst asked, her hand hovering near a comms device. Information, I answered, my eyes locked on the blinking cursor. And to make a statement, they're proving they can reach me no matter where I hide. I started typing, slowly at first, then with growing urgency. I ran making a mistake. This code is unstable. The response was almost instantaneous. They weren't just taunting me. They were dissecting my history, using my own fears and insecurities against me. I had to maintain control. I had to keep them focused on the digital battle, not on the psychological warfare. I need to engage them directly. I told the analyst, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I need to draw them out, try to trap them in a digital sandbox. Give me root access to the network core. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. Granted, but user IP if this goes sideways. It won't. I cut him off, though a sliver of doubt gnawed at me. I had to believe that. I had to make it true. My fingers flew across the keyboard, initiating a series of complex firewall maneuvers, rerouting traffic, creating a virtual cage. The Chrono Lock ransomware was still spreading, a digital plague, but my focus had shifted. The confrontation had begun. The air in the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, hummed with a low, persistent thrum. It was the sound of 1,000 processors working overtime, a symphony of digital panic. My own pulse felt like a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, a stark contrast to the icy efficiency of the room. The Chrono Lock ransomware had breached the outer defenses, a ghost slipping through cracks I'd meticulously plastered over. It's in the grid, the analyst reported, her voice tight, strained. She pointed a trembling finger at a sprawling holographic map of the city. Red nodes pulsed, spreading like a contagion. Power distribution, water treatment, financial exchanges. It's all compromised. I stared at the map, a knot of dread tightening in my gut. This wasn't just about my past anymore. This was about the present, about thousands, maybe millions, of lives hanging precariously in the balance. The attacker, whoever they were, had escalated. They'd moved from the personal to the catastrophic. What's their demand? I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. The analyst swallowed. They haven't made one, not yet, but the system logs. They're showing an activation sequence, triggered for 0300 hours. That's less than 2 hours from now. Less than 2 hours. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath. They weren't after money. They were after disruption. Pure, unadulterated chaos. And the Chrono Lock, with its insidious ability to unravel data at its core, was the perfect instrument. My fingers danced across the keyboard, a desperate ballet of code and commands. I was trying to isolate the infected nodes, to build digital firebreaks, but the ransomware was evolving, adapting faster than I could react. It was like fighting a hydra. Sever one head, and 2 more grew in its place. User IP, We're seeing anomalous activity in the primary server farms. Another technician chimed in, his voice a low murmur of alarm. They're not just locking down systems, they're actively corrupting data. Not randomly, it looks targeted. Targeted at what? My secrets, yes, but what else? What critical data could they possibly want to destroy that would cause such widespread devastation? A flicker on my secondary monitor caught my eye. It was a data stream, encrypted, but I recognized the signature. It was the same one I'd seen in the initial breaches, the one that had led me down this rabbit hole. But this time, it wasn't a passive trace. It was an active communication channel. They're communicating, I breathed, leaning closer. They're not just unleashing the attack, they're watching it unfold. The analyst and the other technician converged behind me, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and grim determination. I worked to decrypt the stream, my mind racing through every possible protocol, every backdoor I'd ever built or encountered. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. Then the text began to resolve. Not a demand, not a threat, but a confession. A twisted, self-serving justification. Not from fear, but from a sickening wave of recognition. The phrasing, the underlying sentiment. It was the warped echo of an ideology I'd once encountered, a fringe group obsessed with unearthing buried secrets, no matter the cost. I dismissed them as harmless fanatics then. I'd been so wrong, I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the data stream. A new packet arrived, smaller, more direct. It contained a single file, a video. User IP, what is that? The technician asked, his voice strained. I clicked it open. The screen flickered, then resolved into a grainy image. Behind him, I saw a familiar logo. The insignia of a defunct tech company I'd worked for years ago. A company that had been shuttered under a cloud of scandal. The man spoke, his voice distorted, but the words were clear. They thought they could bury it, but the truth, like a virus, always finds a way to spread. My breath hitched. The company, the scandal, it all came rushing back, a flood of buried memories I'd fought so hard to suppress. I'd been young, naive, privy to things I shouldn't have been, things that had been deliberately hidden. The video cut out abruptly, replaced by a ticking clock. 02:45:00, the final countdown. They're not just trying to destroy infrastructure, they're trying to expose me, and in doing so, they're going to bring down everything. The analyst looked at me, her expression a mixture of confusion and sudden horror. Expose I? How? I turned to her, the weight of years of secrecy pressing down on me. I had a choice. I could continue to protect my past, to let this attacker unleash their digital apocalypse. Or I could reveal what I knew, what I'd done, what I'd been forced to cover up, and hope that the truth, however devastating, was enough to stop them. The clock was ticking, and the world was about to burn. The air in the state-of-the-art forensic center, everything sterile and cold, hummed with a low, constant thrum. It vibrated through the soles of my worn boots, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence that had been my constant companion for so long. This place, with its gleaming chrome and precisely organized equipment, felt like the antithesis of the chaotic digital storm I'd been weathering. The investigator stood beside me, their gaze fixed on the holographic display currently showing a complex network schematic. It was a map of the damage, a digital scar across the global infrastructure. "They're still pushing," the investigator stated, their voice low and devoid of emotion. "The final payload is ready. If we don't shut it down within the hour, it's irreversible." Irreversible. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I'd spent years building walls around my past, brick by digital brick, believing myself safe in my self-imposed exile. Now those walls were crumbling, and the storm I'd tried so desperately to outrun was here, demanding a reckoning. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the smooth, cool plastic a familiar comfort. This was my domain, the digital realm where I'd always been in control. But this time, the control felt tenuous, like sand slipping through my grasp. The attacker, Echo, had proven to be more than just a skilled hacker. They were a ghost from my past, a specter I'd thought long buried. The encryption key. I murmured, my eyes scanning the lines of code scrolling across the monitor. It's tied to the old project, Project Chimera. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. I hadn't uttered it aloud in a decade, not since the night I'd walked away from everything from them. The investigator turned, their expression unreadable. Project Chimera, what is it? I took a deep breath, the sterile air doing little to calm the frantic beat of my heart. It was a precursor to what they are doing now, a proof of concept, and I was the lead architect. The admission felt like a physical blow. It was the truth, the one I'd meticulously scrubbed from every digital footprint, the one that had defined my isolation. On the main screen, a new window flickered open, displaying a single stark message. You can't hide forever, user IP. We need everything. I nodded, my gaze locked on the taunting message. Echo wasn't just after the infrastructure, they were after me. They wanted me to witness the destruction, to see the chaos I'd inadvertently set in motion, and they wanted me to know that it was all my fault. The key, I responded, my fingers flying across the keyboard, the familiar rhythm of typing a temporary solace. It's embedded in a specific data packet, a signature. I can isolate it, but I need to access the core server, the one I built. Where is it? The investigator pressed. Underground, I replied, a grim smile touching my lips. My old sanctuary. The entrance was a nondescript access panel hidden behind a crumbling section of an abandoned factory, a place where the city's forgotten secrets festered. Finally, we reached it. The server room. Rows of humming servers, their indicator lights blinking like 1,000 tiny, watchful eyes, filled the cavernous space. This was my creation, my digital fortress, and now it was the only place I could find the weapon to fight back. This is it, I added, my voice echoing in the vastness. The master key is here, but Echo knows I'll come for it. They'll be watching. The investigator stood by the entrance, their hand resting on the holster at their hip. Then we moved fast. I worked with a speed born of desperation, my fingers a blur as I navigated the familiar, yet now tainted architecture of the system. The encryption key was a fragile thing, a delicate string of code woven into the very fabric of my past. I could feel Echo's presence, a digital phantom lurking in the periphery, probing, testing. They're trying to breach, the investigator warned, their voice tight. Almost there, I gritted out, my focus absolute. The final sequence was loading, the decryption algorithm ready to deploy. Then a new window popped up, not on my screen but projected onto the wall in front of me. It was a video feed, and there in the flickering light of the server room I saw them. Echo. Not a faceless entity, person. A woman, her face etched with a pain that mirrored my own. I knew that face. The shock was a physical jolt, sending a tremor through my system. Yes, me, she confirmed, a bitter laugh escaping her. I left me behind. The devastating secret I'd been running from. The reason I'd disappeared. It wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about protecting her too. I had made a choice then, a terrible, flawed choice, and now it was coming back to haunt me. I didn't have a choice, I choked out, the words raw with regret. You always have a choice, Echo retorted, her voice hardening. And you chose to condemn me. The final payload was imminent. I had to make a choice here and now. Protect myself or try to salvage what little was left of my conscience. The key, I answered, my voice firming. I have it. I initiated the counter-protocol, a cascade of code designed to unravel Echo's attack. It was a gamble, a desperate play, but it was the only way. On the screen, Echo watched, her expression a mixture of fury and something akin to despair. I think this fixes everything. No, I admitted, my gaze meeting hers on the projection. It doesn't, but it stops this. The digital storm began to recede, the lines of code on my monitors slowly untangling. The immediate threat was neutralized. Echo's image flickered, then vanished, leaving only the stark, sterile walls of the server room. The investigator looked at me, their expression a complex mix of relief and something else I couldn't quite decipher. I had stopped the attack. I had faced my ghost. But the resolution I felt was not one of triumph, but of a somber, weary acceptance. The past was no longer a secret to be guarded, but a burden to be carried, a scar that would forever remind me of the choices I'd made and the price I had to pay. My reclusion was over, but the peace I'd sought in isolation was gone, replaced by the quiet, insistent hum of a world that now knew my name, and the truth I had tried so hard to forget.